idea that marriage is something entered into freely between two people is very recently. And in ancient Greece, marriage was the sale of a woman by the father to a husband. It's the same in ancient Israel. If you read the Christian scriptures, it's bride price. Very recently, we've come up with this idea of marriage as a free union between two people in order to express, well, we have a lot of freedom and a lot of luxury in a post-industrial society, and marriage changed because of those things. But do you really want to go back to the ancient way that marriage worked? I think we're going to go back.
Sorry, just a quick comment to Patrick on the left. When you said that perhaps the debate about same-sex marriage is possibly unfairly attributed to teenage suicide, do you think then perhaps the comments by influential people such as your infallible leader, the Pope, saying that homosexuals are, to quote him, morally evil and disordered, does have something to do with teenage suicide?
Dr. Van Galen.
Well, I'm not a Catholic, but if I can speak for that wonderful man, Pope Benedict, he never said that, and nor does the Catechism. The Catechism says that the acts are intrinsically disordered, is what I understand they say. But there's never any question. It goes straight on from there, because I was so impressed by that. It said the acts may be intrinsically disordered, but people do not choose the orientation, and that many of them is a cause of suffering, and there must be no unjust discrimination against them. I found that a very beautiful synthesis of principled ideals as to what makes for sexual innocence and sexual goodness, according to their Christian tradition, their Catholic tradition. And also an immediate reaching out to all the beautiful people who are afflicted, often against their will, by an attraction that they do not want. That's who I think the Church cares for. But as I say, I'm not a Catholic, so I can't speak for them.
And I'm just in response to your question. I am a Catholic. I'm not here making a Catholic argument for marriage. It's one consistent with Catholics, Christians, and people who have no faith whatsoever, who understand and grasp this. But speaking as a Catholic, the Catholic Church holds sex in a very, very high and dignified place. It sees sex as a special union between a man and a woman that brings forth life, and that's very important and very sacred. And the best place for the significance of an act like that is that the physical act takes place in a larger emotional, volitional union, where they know that the fruit of that sort of act and that sort of loving bond will be brought into the world with a mum and a dad. And so when the church talks about other sort of sexual activities, whether it's homosexual, or not even just homosexual, but other acts between heterosexual boyfriends, girlfriends, or even people who are married, it all holds them to the same standard. It all holds them to the idea that these sexual acts should be expressive of a marital bond. And so it sees marriage as the central thing here. The rest of the church's teaching of sexual ethics flows out from understanding of the good and the value that is made possible through one flesh union. So that's the main thing.
Thanks, Pat. The gentleman down the front. Just before you go, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'll take one more question after this gentleman's, and then we'll.
Okay, yeah, I'm just going to two really quick fire things. So on your side, Pat, so you say that the public good of marriage is inherent in the children that produces. I don't see the limiting principle there between promoting marriage and then, say, for example, banning smoking between parents, which often takes parents away from their kids, or banning ski trips or base jumping or anything which we consider is likely to take parents away from their children in the same way that you think marriage will prevent. And on your side, Pat, you listed as generally consistent with conservative principles to support same-sex marriage. Why not roll back the government entirely in this area, abolish the Marriage Act, and put it back into the hands of civil and religious society from which it never rightfully should have been taken?
I think we'll just start with Pat on the left here.
The short answer is I agree with you. I don't see why the state has a role in defining or regulating marriage, but so long as they do, I think it is morally repugnant for the state, without any powerful and compelling reasons, to justify withholding a civil institution, a civil function, and something that it celebrates and offers absolutely public approval for, to withhold that from a certain class of people.
Thank you. The gentleman down the back. Stand up so we can see you.
Okay, my question is, how would me marrying the person that I love damage heterosexual marriages? How will me marrying the man that I love in any way whatsoever hurt, damage, have any detrimental impact upon straight couples? Because I think a most reasonable thing people can see that the answer is it won't.
I think the main thing is that the law teaches it as an educative function, right? That's the purpose of why the state's been using the marriage law, is to put soft social pressure on people to keep informed certain commitments. But if we switch from one view of marriage, being marriage is a union between a man and woman, it's inherently, by reason of the union that it is, oriented towards children and therefore grounds and justifies norms of exclusivity and permanence. That's the reason why the state has an interest in at least getting involved. If we switch from this view to the idea that marriage is just a strong, romantic, loving, emotional union between two people, and they can be between the people of the same sex, then there is no inherent orientation to procreation, childbearing and family life. Right? Because two men, they can't make a baby from that. Their union will not do that. So we've switched then fully to the idea that marriage does not have anything to do with setting up as ideal the way that kids have any part of marriage. Right? They can bring in other sort of laws that try and get people to adopt, things like that, but by its nature, the union between two men doesn't have inherent orientation to procreation. And because it doesn't have that, because marriage is one law, and same-sex couples and opposite-sex couples would be understood to be under the same law, marriage would be understood under a new understanding, which sees marriage as an emotional union with no inherent orientation to children or procreation or family life. The norms then that are used to it will seem to make less sense, right? And that making less sense, people will feel less likely to abide by them. Less likely to abide by them, we all know what happens when permanence and exclusivity aren't abided by. Kids grow up without fathers, without mothers. A whole range of social pathologies follows. And the main thing is that when marriage is understood to be an emotional union, marriages themselves would take on an increasing turbulence of emotions, right? That's part of the reason why no one said that no-fault divorce would create problems with marriages. It would stop really difficult, high conflict family situations. It would allow kids to grow up without divisive parents. But scholars, over the last couple of decades, unanimously in the family scholarship, know that no-fault divorces have irreparable damages to the well-being of kids and to family life. Now that's something that they couldn't predict at the time, couldn't see it. People were talking about that, and every single main advocate in this issue on same-sex marriage against same-sex marriage has been involved for decades before in trying to rebuild the marital culture. We are not fixated on homosexuality, nor do we think that this is the central issue. Everyone here on our side who is interested in marriage has been spending decades trying to rebuild the marital culture now, and because all of us depend on it. It's the best department of health, education and welfare that the government cannot do. Only the marriage and family can help build upright, virtuous, law-abiding citizens. Tinkering with that, and you're tinkering with one of the very fundamental units of society.
Thanks, Pat. We've got time for one more question. I'll ask you to keep it quick, and then we'll go to closing remarks.
Alright, my question is to Pat with a tie, then I'd like Pat sans tie to respond if that's okay. My specialty is in arts and particularly the meaning of words, and known for society we rely so much on words having a particular meaning. So my question to you is, if we see that marriage in a sense, as Pat defines it, as a bodily union of uniting the two halves of humanity into one, is there a real problem, considering that all the laws have been changed to remove civil discrimination against homosexual couples, just referring to them as civil unions?
Are you saying that, are they equivalent institutions? Is that what you're asking?
I'm saying, what I'm arguing for is, or asking really, is that if we want to keep words with clear definitions, is there a real problem if you hold that they're equal? Why do they have to have the same label if in reality they're different?
Well, I don't think in reality they are different. I think that ultimately what we're talking about is public commitment to a shared life together. Now it's important to remember that that definition actually isn't in the existing Marriage Amendment Act. I mean, Patrick Sonstai has talked about the fact that we're altering the basic definition, but that definition actually isn't in the legislation. It's just a value which he may hold and a lot of other people hold. It happens to be a value I hold as well. I think that's an important aspect of marriage which we should try to preserve. But the reality is there are a lot of couples out there that get married that don't believe in that. As I said at the start, I mean, it's a reality that there are child abusers, there are rapists, there are all sorts of awful, awful people that can get married that that may not hold those values. But if you happen to love somebody that shares your sex, you can't get married. So I think in reality they are the same thing. I think ultimately we're talking about a commitment to a shared life together. I think the best way to be able to preserve that is to allow this group of people to marry. I don't think civil unions are an equivalent institution in the same way that, you know, in America in the 19th century and early 20th century, having two toilets that were of equal standard, one for blacks and one for whites, it was still wrong. It was still immoral. It didn't matter that there were certain benefits which came with both. It wouldn't have even mattered if the toilet for black people was superior. The Supreme Court held that that is unjust and that's discrimination. And it's the same here. If we're going to have an institution, we're going to say it's marriage, and the state is going to offer full public approval and say this is a wonderful institution, you need a really good reason to deny it to a group of people out there.
Thanks, Pat. What we'll do now is, if you could state your closing remarks in 20 words, just quickly, and then we'll go to Diana and Bridget. If you could leave the audience with one pearl of wisdom, 20 words or less, Pastor.
I think that gays and Christians need to get to know each other and find out more about what we have in common.
Huh?
Yeah, look, I would agree with that. I think to get back to this person's question earlier as to how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, I think same-sex marriage definitely is going to happen because it's a profoundly generational issue. I mean, the poll showed that 75% of young people support marriage equality, and that's a product of the fact that they know lots of gay people. More gay people are coming out and getting to know heterosexuals. And the moment you get to know gays and lesbians, the moment you get to know gays and lesbians, it becomes almost impossible to justify to yourself why you should say to this group of people they're not capable of the same love and commitment that you are.
Absolutely, smash the word.
Marriage equality, like any other sort of so-called marriage equality, is not inevitable like any other social issue. Human freedom is the permanent foil of every inevitability thesis. It's something that the Marxists had to learn hard. I think that kids need a mum and a dad. Something very basic. That's the reason why we protect the institution of marriage. It is not based in animist homosexualism. It is not based in religion, purely religion. It's accessible to people or anyone reflecting on the facts of human nature, relationships between men and women, the importance that kids need to grow up with the loving care of their mums and dads.
Thanks, Pat.
I'll leave you with a quote from a much greater authority on marriage than me, David Blankenhorn, who says, "Marriage is fundamentally about the needs of children. Redefining marriage to include gay and lesbian couples would eliminate entirely in the law and weaken still further in the culture the basic idea of a mother and a father for every child." End quote. So at the end of this forum, let's hope we've broken out of that narrow narcissistic frame of reference where marriage equality is all about equal love between adults and don't talk about the kids, and break out into a situation where we consider the equal rights of every child entering the world to the love of her mum and her dad. Thanks very much.
All right, folks, well that wraps up our debate over marriage equality. I'd like to invite Bridget Meany from the Catholic Society of St. Peter and Diana Kalkul, who is one of our USU queer coordinators, to say thank you to our wonderful guests for providing us with such a great debate this afternoon.
Okay, so firstly, Bridget and I would like to thank Patrick Bateman, Patrick Langerel, Dr. David Van Gen, and of course Dr. Carl Hand. We'd also love to thank our fantastic moderator today, Zach Thompson, who did this on very short notice for us, but today. And thank you everyone in the audience who had a question. Sorry if I didn't get to you on time, and thanks for sticking around.
Can I get one more round of applause for Pastor Patrick Langerel